Hi, everyone. So I'm here to represent a research that we just published as of today. Just a little bit of background. For those who are very active in the sustainable bonds loan market in Hong Kong, you're very familiar with the figure that about 80% of these sustainable financing were arranged in Hong Kong for Chinese borrowers in the mainland, right? This really shows the importance of connectivity with mainland China when it comes to green finance, as Hong Kong does play a very critical role in capital raising to support China's net zero ambition. So from the perspective of GBA, we set up a working group in 2022 to look at how do we harmonize green definitions so that we can really ensure international capital flow to support mainland's ambition to further utilize Hong Kong. So the working group was formed, co-led by Hong Kong GFA and Guangdong Green Finance Committee, together with our members to deliver these three phases of research, right? So we did the first one in phase 2 in 2022, if I remember correctly, looking at the opportunities of a CGT-based taxonomy and the use cases of a CGT-based taxonomies in Hong Kong. Now we have gone further to look at how do we really operationalize a CGT-based taxonomy for the region. So to just recap, this chart really illustrated, where we are and what we are proposing to policymakers and market participants, right? So to recap, we have the prototype that you already heard from HKMA Eddie this morning that has really set up a very good solid structure how to define green activities using 4 pilot sectors that are most important to Hong Kong's carbon footprint. So based on that, what kind of suggestions that we are putting forward? There are 5 suggestions. First one is to looking at expansion of the scope to ensure that we are really categorizing enough green activities so that it's broad enough for the finance sector, including banks, asset managers, to really deploy the capital to support these green activities that are very meaningful for the GBA region. Secondly is the inclusion of transition. We have heard transition from morning until even just now. A lot has been said. It's in the range of trillions, depending on what kind of statistics that you quote. So enough has been said, but not enough has been done, right? So this time we make an attempt to define 3 sectors from steel, cement, and petrochemicals in their credible transition activities. And finally is other key considerations such as implementation of do no significant harms and minimum social safeguards as part of the future taxonomy in Hong Kong. And the inclusion or linking green tech with green fi, which was the earlier panel, right? And finally is the application use cases on the ground. So let's just look at it one by one. So for the expansion of green activities, we look at the current 4 pilot sectors and propose to policymakers that there could be additional sectors, green activities of the existing 4 sectors and an additional agriculture sector to define their green activities based on common ground taxonomy. So in the report that you will be able to see once you download it from our website, you'll be able to see this technical outline of how to look at these activities. And therefore, as banks or asset managers, when you deploy your capital, if they align to these technical criteria as outlined by the common ground taxonomy, you can consider this as green activities, which is something that we want to propose to policymakers for their consideration. Secondly is transition. For the 3 pilot sectors, there's a rationale behind our selection. Obviously, these are very high impact sector. From the region, as looking at GBA as a whole, when we look at, the decarbonization plan of Guangdong province, when we look at, the carbon markets of Guangdong, these core sectors are part of that scope, right? So therefore, finance is urgently needed to support their decarbonization. And when we did this, there are some proposals in terms of how to look at their transition credibility in terms of activities. So we basically utilize a lot of existing credible standards out there instead of reinventing the wheel. For instance, we have taken a look at NDRC definition in terms of minimum criteria, best cases criteria. We have referenced CBI standards, EU taxonomy. So basically, this is a very good melting pot of extracting credible transition activities technical criteria. So again, if you go to the report, you'll be able to find to download the technical criteria outlined in the report. In the interest of time, I don't think I'm allowed to go through in detail, otherwise Tracy will give me a hard time. But just a couple more seconds on transition activities, right? What we're saying is that just defining transition at the point in time in terms of project criteria is not sufficient. Transition is a very dynamic process from brown to green. So anything in between is transition. So we want to make sure that issuers or financiers need to include some of the major principles taken from G20, OECD, and ICMA for credible transition. So Paris alignment, be science-based, be sure that the transition goals and pathways do not rely on carbon offset, and include an assessment of current and expected technologies to determine their decarbonization, and backed by operating matrices to provide transparency rather than just a high-level commitment or a pledge. And finally, the avoidance of carbon locked-in. So for other considerations like do no significant harm, which is something that has been talked about so much for those who are very active in the sustainable scene, right? There's so much complexity in it due to the overprescription. So for us, simplicity is the beauty. So when we look at Hong Kong as well as mainland China, we already have the existence of environmental impact assessments or equivalent to that. So that really looking at a wide range of environmental impacts when you conduct infrastructure projects, right? So these could really address the do no significant harm consideration in a taxonomy, which is something that we believe can be very useful as we are going into the next phase of Hong Kong taxonomy development. And the same thing for minimum social safeguards. The topic can be very wide, from labor rights, human rights, so on and so forth. But for GBA, for Asia, we want to really zoom into it from a just transition angle. So really finding what are the key considerations when it comes to minimum social safeguards, and therefore reflect that accordingly in the implementation. Just a couple lines about the adoption and utilization. Earlier in the fire chat, HKMA CE Eddie mentioned that it would be a gradual implementation, and that's something that we are in complete alignment and very supportive of the government's thinking. From our perspective, we would recommend to gradually roll it in from a voluntary base to mandatory. First, the pilot usage can be in some of the green bonds, sustainable green loans, particularly those are issued by the public sector issuers. They can really lead in terms of taxonomy alignment in their own issuing plans. Secondly, is to expand that with policy incentive schemes to support, the taxonomy alignment, so that there will be more encouragement, in the market. So capacity building is certainly very important. So once, now that we are launching the report, we will definitely roll out a number of capacity building for the markets, for our members, so that you can understand, the implication of the of taxonomy in your structuring work, as well as in your investment strategies, so on and so forth. So if we go back to our phase 2, which we launched last year, we actually outlined 7 use cases from policy, disclosure, debt instruments, equity strategies, and so on, and corporate disclosure in terms of the wider usage of a future taxonomy. And finally, I would really like to thank my peers within the working group. These are the amazing individuals and minds who are sacrificing a lot of their personal time, effort, resources, and insight to make this report possible. So thank you so much for those. Unfortunately, we can't have everybody on stage. I hope I'm doing their justice in launching this report. And finally, please stay tuned with us. So as I said, we will roll out a number of webinars, workshops to further disseminate the outcomes to support, to encourage and support the use of our proposal in the future taxonomy. Thank you very much.